Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Came after lunch, badges, boots, and a bogus fine. Said my koi pond was a threat to the ecosystem. By nightfall, someone had sabotaged my filter. They thought I'd roll over, but they knocked on the wrong gate. This isn't just my land, it's the front line, and I'm ready for war. Showed up just after lunch while I was out by the lower bank, trimming reeds along the crescent edge of the koi pond. It had rained that morning, and the mossy stones around the cascade were glistening like polished jade. I'd just finished scraping algae from the waterfall intake when I heard gravel crunching behind me. 3 pairs of boots, maybe 4. I stood, wiped my hands on my work apron, and turned to find 3 people in navy windbreakers, each with a laminate badge swinging from a lanyard. HOA badges. The taller one, a bald man with mirrored sunglasses and the kind of clipboard that screamed, "Wannabe government," cleared his throat like we were in a courtroom. Brandon Holt, I nodded. Depends who's asking. He motioned to the 2 beside him, one young, bored, and already looking at my koi with suspicion. The other, a middle-aged woman whose entire posture screamed judgment. She stepped forward. "We're here on behalf of the Everidge Pines Homeowners Association Environmental Compliance Task Force," she said, as if I should salute. "You are hereby notified of a Category 4 environmental violation." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" She held out a letter-sized envelope with a red-stamped cover page. "Violation notice, Ecological Infraction Level 4. My name and address were typed underneath in a bold sans serif font with an official-looking emblem embossed in the top corner. Your artificial pond is allegedly compromising the subterranean water table," she continued. "The aquifer beneath this area feeds several residential wells." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Instead, the clipboard guy stepped in and pointed a pen toward the pond. "Furthermore, your use of non-native aquatic species and fertilizers constitutes a threat to regional biodiversity." I nearly laughed. "You're telling me koi, decorative carp, are an invasive threat?" The woman sniffed. "And the nitrate levels in runoff water may already be exceeding federal thresholds." I took the envelope but didn't open it right away. "And you have jurisdiction over my land how exactly?" She straightened. "Any environmental hazard within half a mile of Everidge Pines falls under the HOA's protective interest. As such, we are authorized to levy penalties for ecological endangerment." "Protective interest?" I echoed. "I'm not part of your HOA. Never have been." That's when she gave me the smile. That smug, perfectly triangular Karen smile you only see in courtroom dramas and PTA battles. "Whether you signed on or not, your actions affect our community." They turned and left without another word, their boots crunching down my gravel path like a bad omen. I opened the envelope with the back of my folding knife. Inside was a fine, $50,100, to be paid within 30 days, along with a directive to initiate immediate drainage and ecological restoration of the artificial pond feature. For a few seconds, I genuinely wondered if I was having a stroke. I walked back to the pond in silence, just in time to watch one of the koi glide beneath the lily pads. Water bubbled gently from the top of the cascade, filtered through layers of stone, charcoal, and vegetation I'd painstakingly installed over months. This pond was my pride and joy. It was legal. It was certified. Hell, I'd had it reviewed by the state's own Department of Ecology before I even broke ground. So when I heard the SUV again, this time a black BMW with tinted windows, I didn't bother to hide the scowl on my face. It pulled up like it owned the place, and sure enough, out stepped a woman in a cream blazer, manicured to the fingernail, with aviators and a clipboard tucked under one arm. "I assume you're Karen Stafford," I called. She didn't smile. "Mr. Holt," she said with grave finality. "Let's not make this adversarial. You can either comply with the remediation order, or we can escalate." "Escalate to what?" I asked. "This isn't even your jurisdiction." She stepped closer, heels clicking on stone. "It is now. If your pond continues to poison our water table, you will face court-mandated penalties." "Don't make this more complicated than it has to be." I folded my arms. "Karen, let me explain something. This pond sits on private land, built with full permits, inspected, signed off. And the only thing it's poisoning right now is your mood." She didn't flinch. "You have 14 days to act. After that, we bring in county oversight and file for environmental injunction." She turned without another word and drove off, leaving behind the heavy scent of lavender and litigation. I stood alone by the water, heart pounding, not with fear, but disbelief. Somewhere between the koi and the cattails, I'd apparently become a public enemy, and I was just getting started. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared, because I was pissed. I sat in my office above the garage, surrounded by blueprints, zoning maps, soil reports, and a binder that read Department of Ecology, Final Compliance Package. That damn fine, $50,100, like they'd crunched it on a calculator set to absurd, was still spread across my desk, along with 3 printed copies of the so-called violation notice. I'd seen a lot of bull in my life. I'd worked in agricultural regulation before starting my own company, and I'd waded through enough bureaucracy to recognize the smell of fabricated authority. This wasn't just HOA overreach. This was sabotage disguised as policy. By morning, I'd already contacted my attorney, Madeline Maddie Pierce, former environmental law prosecutor, quick-witted, stone-cold, and allergic to fools. I texted her a photo of the fine and asked how illegal this was on a scale of 1 to burn them to the ground. Her reply came back in under a minute. Meet me at noon. Bring everything. Before that, I took a stroll around the pond. The upper cascade hummed gently, the water clean and flowing through the reed filtration bed. My sensors showed normal pH. The fish were active, nothing out of order, except for the hose. A thick, high-grade hose from the Western filtration unit had been sliced, clean and precise, like someone had used pruning shears. The biofilter chamber had drained a good 20 gallons of water into the soil overnight. It wasn't animal damage. No chew marks. I walked the property line and found the gate unlatched. The side camera was off. Dead battery. Convenient. Back inside, I pulled the footage from the garden cam. At 3:24 a.m., a figure stepped into frame, a man in a reflective HOA vest. He moved quickly, head down, carrying something that looked very much like gardening tools. Snipped the hose, stepped back out. In and out in under 2 minutes. No face. But the vest had a logo. I saved the footage to a flash drive and printed 3 stills. At noon, sharp, I met Maddie at her firm's office in Tacoma. She scanned the documents while sipping black coffee and muttering like she was cross-examining them. Then she looked up. This is nonsense. I leaned back. Go on. There's no jurisdiction. You're not in their HOA. They have no environmental enforcement authority outside their subdivision. These claims would never hold in court. Figured, I said. What about the fine? Her eyes narrowed. They're presenting it as a civic penalty, not a private claim. That's fraud. And this signature at the bottom? C. Delano, Environmental Inspector, Everidge Pines. I ran it through our database. No such licensed inspector exists. I don't think this guy is even real. I handed her the flash drive. There's more. Someone trespassed last night. Cut into my filtration system. I have video. She plugged it into her laptop, brows raising as the clip played. Then she smirked. Want to guess what else is illegal? Sabotage, trespassing, tampering with licensed filtration infrastructure. We're looking at criminal charges if we play this right. Karen won't go down easy, I said. She won't have a choice. We filed a police report that afternoon. The responding officer, a younger guy with a tired badge and a clipboard of his own, seemed hesitant at first until he saw the footage. He agreed to flag the incident as suspicious environmental sabotage and logged the name of the HOA. Back home, I posted new signs around the pond. Private property, ecologically certified. Trespassers will be recorded and prosecuted. Then I set up a backup power source for all cameras and upgraded the solar feeds. I wasn't playing anymore. But HOA wasn't done. The next day, I found flyers slipped under my gate in waterproof plastic sleeves. Each one read, "Attention neighbors. Do you know what's leaking into your groundwater? Unauthorized industrial fish farming is taking place less than 500 feet from our homes. You have the right to safe water. Demand action. Demand accountability." Everidge Pines HOA Committee on Environmental Justice. They were fear-mongering now, framing me as a toxic neighbor. I recognized the language. It was engineered, political, weaponized, and effective. That afternoon, I had 3 cars slow roll past the property, drivers glaring like I'd built a nuclear reactor next to their pool. I was still collecting flyers from the hedges when I got the call. It was my state environmental contact, Leo Ramirez, from the original pond permitting. "Brandon," he said, "we got a weird request in our inbox this morning. Somebody filed an anonymous complaint against you, alleging environmental misconduct and improper licensing. I checked the coordinates. They're not even accurate. We'll need to inspect just to close the case formally. But off the record, it smells like garbage." I exhaled slowly. "I'm ready. Come see it for yourself." I was officially under siege, on my own land, doing things by the book, while people who had no right to even look over my fence tried to bury me with made-up laws. They thought I'd back down. They'd clearly never dealt with a koi breeder during spawning season. The state environmental team arrived 2 days later, 3 agents in marked vehicles with sealed decals and clipboards that actually meant something. Leo Ramirez stepped out first, his ponytail a little grayer than I remembered, but his handshake just as firm. He gave the koi pond a slow, appreciative nod. "Looks better than last year," he said. "New reed bed, stronger filtration," I replied. "Not that it matters to the HOA ecosystem experts." He snorted and motioned to his colleagues. "We'll run the standard test just so the paperwork is clean. But I've already got questions." We started with the so-called coordinates of contamination listed in the HOA's complaint. Leo entered them into his GPS unit and frowned. "These aren't even on your land." "Say again." He turned the screen toward me. The pin hovered over a parcel clearly outside my fencing, on the far side of a utility easement, smack in the middle of Everidge Pines. "Technically, these are their tennis courts." "You're telling me their own complaint accuses them of pollution?" Leo grinned. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Meanwhile, his team ran turbidity, nitrate, and coliform tests on the pond outflow and water table monitors. All readings came back clean, better than most natural bodies in the county. While the agents worked, I showed Leo my documentation again. The permits, the construction plans, the ecological surveys. He skimmed, nodded, and snapped photos for official records. By noon, he was done. "Everything here's in compliance. Gold star stuff," he said. "I'm closing the complaint as unfounded, but I'm escalating this. These fake claims, this looks like fraud. I'll be sending it to the Attorney General's Environmental Integrity Unit." "What about the flyers?" "We saw them," Leo said darkly. "Fear-based propaganda like that can fall under harassment. I'd keep them." Chain of evidence. They left with samples, footage, and a growing sense of disbelief. As Leo pulled away, he honked once and gave me a thumbs up through the window. That same afternoon, Maddie emailed me a bombshell. She'd traced the metadata on the digital violation letter issued by the HOA. The PDF properties showed the author field as C. Delano Finance, and the software license matched a machine registered to Everidge Pines HOA Office 2. C. Delano, who had signed off as the environmental inspector, was in reality their bookkeeper. No license, no environmental credentials, just QuickBooks and a shaky sense of power. It got worse. Maddie also pulled a copy of the HOA's community guidelines from their website's public access portal. Nowhere in the document did it mention environmental enforcement outside HOA-owned land. Their regulations had been retroactively added to a public FAQ page 2 weeks prior, after I received the fine. They rewrote their own rules to justify what they'd already tried to do to me. This wasn't just overreach, it was a targeted con job. Fueled by this discovery, I contacted a friend who freelanced as an open-source investigator. Within 24 hours, she dug up a forum post on a small HOA legal board. The post, made under the username GreenShieldWA, read, "Has anyone dealt with a neighbor who's technically outside the HOA boundary but causes indirect impact, runoff, wildlife disruption, view obstruction? Any strategies for applying pressure?" The IP matched the Everidge Pines HOA office. The timestamp was dated 3 days before I received the original fine. The entire playbook had been planned in advance. I forwarded everything to Maddie, who immediately filed a notice with the state civil court indicating intent to pursue a claim of fraudulent action by the HOA. She also filed a cease and desist letter personally addressed to Karen Stafford. That should have been the end of it, but instead, the Everidge Pines HOA doubled down. The next morning, a drone flew over my pond. Not a casual flyby, a tactical slow sweep. It hovered low, beneath treetop level, and circled the filtration basin. I recorded it with my phone and even managed to shoot it briefly with my garden hose, sending it reeling sideways. but not before I saw the small white letters on its underbelly, EPHOA 3. They had their own fleet. Christ, I called Maddie. Do you know what I saw hovering over my water lilies today? She groaned. This just became fun. We drafted a second police report for harassment via surveillance and attached both the video and the drone's visible ID. The officer at the station raised an eyebrow when he saw the footage. They're flying over your land without consent. Fully over, I said. Multiple passes. Yeah, that's actionable. Later that evening, a neighbor I barely knew pulled up to my gate. Retired Vietnam vet, lived 2 properties east. He handed me a beer and said, "Just so you know, Karen's telling folks you're running an unlicensed fish processing plant. Says you're dumping bio-waste into the creek." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the bottle. Guess I'm the sushi cartel now. He clinked bottles with me. She's got the HOA spending money like water on lawyers and mailers. Somebody's going to ask questions soon. They would. And I intended to make sure the answers came with subpoenas. When the EPA emails you directly, it's never a small matter. When they email you twice in one morning, it means someone somewhere has screwed up so spectacularly that the federal government is now rearranging its afternoon. At 8:42 a.m., I got the first message, a formal acknowledgement that my complaint had been received and was being reviewed. Standard language, automated signature, nothing unusual. At 9:17 a.m., the second message arrived from an actual human being at the regional EPA office. Subject line, request for site access, Everidge Pines. Not my property, not my name, Everidge Pines. Attached was a scanned letter addressed to the HOA stating that the agency intended to conduct a surprise compliance inspection on their recreational facilities due to inconsistencies in environmental documentation recently brought to the agency's attention. Inconsistencies. Bureaucratic code for somebody lied. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, let out a long breath, and sat back in my chair. So it wasn't just me. Something in Everidge Pines had started rotting long before they set their sights on my pond, and I was about to find out just how deep the mold went. By mid-morning, I heard the rumble of engines, big ones, rolling down the road toward the gated entrance of Everidge Pines. I stepped out to the ridge that overlooked their tennis courts and clubhouse. From up there, you could see everything. Trimmed lawns, shiny SUVs, and residents walking their designer dogs like it was a curated lifestyle catalog. And then the convoy arrived. 2 EPA vehicles, 1 county environmental truck, 1 unmarked SUV that screamed assistant prosecutor. All of them stopped at the HOA gate. From the distance, I saw Karen Stafford power walk out of the HOA office like she'd been summoned to explain why the earth was round. She waved her arms, pointed, shook her head, and tried to block the inspectors from entering. One agent calmly held out a clipboard. Karen snatched it, scanned it, and then froze. Even from where I stood, I recognized the look. The moment someone realizes the situation has slipped completely out of their control, the team moved past her. They started at the tennis courts, once a patch of protected wetland. I'd seen it on old maps while researching my own permits, a marshy, depressional area that fed into the seasonal creek. It had been flagged as ecologically sensitive. Back then, the HOA had assured the county they wouldn't touch it, but they had touched it. Oh, they had definitely touched it. As I watched, an EPA agent walked the perimeter with a soil probe. Another took photos of the drainage culverts. A third stood ankle-deep in mud behind the courts, scooping water into a vial and shaking his head. I didn't need binoculars to know that the smell they were wrinkling their noses at wasn't floral. Around lunchtime, Leo sent me a message. "You won't believe this. Their stormwater runoff is dumping straight into the protected basin. No filters, no permits, no nothing." I absolutely could believe it. Around 2 p.m., I got a second message. Concrete fill under the courts. Illegal removal of red cedar. Violations on violations. This isn't a citation situation. This is criminal. That word again. Criminal. While I absorbed that, another unexpected visitor came knocking, this time not in a vest or carrying forged documents, but wearing a cheap suit and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. A man from inside the HOA, more precisely, the treasurer. He wasn't brave. His hands shook, and he kept glancing back toward the road as if Karen herself might materialize in a puff of lavender-scented rage. "Mr. Holt," he began, twisting his hands together, I think there's something you should know." I leaned on the porch railing. "If this is about the fine, it's all fake," he blurted. The violations, the eco committee, the inspector, it's all fabricated. Karen made us sign off on everything. Said it was necessary to protect property values. I didn't know she would actually file claims with the state agencies. You signed off? I asked. He swallowed. I didn't realize what she was doing. She said it was a preventative measure. I just processed the paperwork she gave me. And the drone. That was her idea too. She bought them with HOA funds. Said we needed aerial evidence. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. I didn't know she'd fly them over your property. Of course you didn't, I muttered. He stepped closer, panicked desperation replacing his earlier hesitation. Look, I'm cooperating now. I'll give statements, emails, meeting notes. He lowered his voice. She told the board your pond would tank the real estate market. Said if she didn't neutralize your project, the neighborhood would become, quote, the next algal slum. I stared. She called my koi pond an algal slum? He nodded miserably. She also said you were running an illegal hatchery and laundering profits through landscaping invoices. I blinked once. That is impressively stupid. While I processed that, he shoved a USB drive into my hand. This has copies of everything. I shouldn't have it. But I can't be part of this anymore. Then he hurried off, nearly tripping over my walkway stones in his rush to escape both the situation and his conscience. When he drove away, I returned inside and plugged the USB into my laptop. It held everything: draft letters, unsubmitted board minutes, internal memos, even a document titled Strategic Environmental Leverage Plan. At the bottom of the document was a handwritten note. Start with Holt. Set a precedent. Initials, KS. Precedent. They wanted to make me an example. Instead, they'd made themselves Exhibit A in a federal investigation. By dusk, EPA agents were still at Everidge Pines, still collecting evidence, still photographing things that had clearly been illegal for a very long time. Residents gathered on sidewalks, whispering, pointing, arguing. Some looked angry. Some looked scared. Some looked like they finally understood who had been taking their HOA fees and where those fees had not been going. I watched it all from my ridge, arms crossed, koi waterfall humming behind me. This had started with a fake fine. Now it was turning into a reckoning, and I wasn't even done yet. It started with a whisper, one of those low, ugly ones that doesn't need volume to carry weight. By the next morning, the whisper had turned into a tremor. And by the end of the week, Everidge Pines was cracking open like a bad tooth under federal pressure. The EPA didn't just leave after their little field trip. No, they came back with company. On Monday, agents from the Washington State Department of Ecology arrived with clipboards, cameras, and attitudes like they'd been waiting years to stick it to some rich HOA that thought stormwater runoff laws were optional. They didn't just inspect the tennis courts again. They combed through the entire HOA complex, maintenance sheds, tool storage, clubhouse septic systems. They even sent a diver into the decorative pond near the front entrance to test for illegal discharge. That diver emerged with a bucket of viscous gray sludge and muttered something about violations stacked like Jenga blocks. Meanwhile, I had my own mess to sort through. The USB drive from the treasurer was a gold mine, not just for me, but for my lawyer, Carla Hayes. Carla was a bulldog in a tailored blazer, and when I showed her the files, she blinked once, then laughed so hard she nearly dropped her tablet. These idiots committed 3 different kinds of fraud in one document, she said, pointing to the eco enforcement template Karen had drafted. Environmental misrepresentation, impersonating a regulatory body, and attempted zoning interference. And that's before the forged signatures. Carla didn't wait. She filed a motion for injunctive relief within 24 hours and sent formal notice to the HOA board that any further contact with me or my property would result in criminal charges. She also faxed copies of the fake documents to the county prosecutor's office, the state attorney general, and, just for good measure, the regional media. On Wednesday morning, the bomb dropped. HOA president under federal investigation read the headline on the Puget Daily. Below it, a smiling photo of Karen Stafford, still in pearls, still smug, next to a list of potential charges that included document tampering, environmental code violation, and impersonation of a state inspector. The article quoted an unnamed source who described Karen's efforts as a calculated attack on a neighboring landowner with falsified documents created to manufacture leverage. That source, I'm not ashamed to say, was me. By Thursday, the HOA offices were empty. The blinds were drawn, the parking lot half full, and the woman who used to sit at the front desk had apparently taken extended sick leave. Residents started poking around my fence line again, not with drones this time, but with curiosity. One man came to my gate and asked nervously if I was the fish guy. I told him yes. He apologized. Told me he'd voted for Karen's enforcement budget last year because she'd claimed I was building a commercial aquatic center without permits. I just nodded. Turns out, I read the Clean Water Act better than she did. By Friday, the financial side of the collapse began. An emergency HOA meeting was called, virtually of course, and someone leaked the whole thing to a community Facebook group. The recording landed in my inbox via a former board member who clearly wanted to distance herself from the fireball. It was glorious. You could hear Karen trying to maintain control while half the board shouted over each other, demanding to know where their legal defense fund had gone, why the insurance company was refusing coverage, and whether it was true that HOA funds had been used to pay for the drone surveillance. Someone, I think it was the treasurer, muttered, "We're so screwed," into a hot mic. By Monday of the following week, 2 board members had formally resigned. The treasurer who came to my door, Paul, I heard he'd lawyered up and was actively cooperating with investigators. He had reportedly turned over everything to the county DA, emails, receipts, the forged violation reports, even meeting recordings Karen didn't know he had. And then, like the final nail in the coffin, the court unsealed an indictment. Count 1, criminal environmental misrepresentation. Count 2, use of forged instruments in a civil enforcement attempt count. 3, conspiracy to commit regulatory fraud. Karen Stafford was subpoenaed. Her fake inspector, real name, Craig Maddox, a landscaper with 2 misdemeanors, was also named. The charges were real, the penalties stiff, and the look on Karen's face when the news van swarmed her driveway was worth every koi scale in my pond. That night, as I stood by my waterfall, sipping tea under the soft amber light of my porch lamp, I watched the Everidge Pines gate stand awkwardly open, unguarded, unmonitored, exposed. Residents milled around in confusion, waiting for direction that wouldn't come. The self-appointed queen had fallen, and now the kingdom was crumbling with her. The HOA bank accounts were frozen by court order. A special master was appointed to oversee their records. The contractor who'd built the tennis courts under verbal agreements was subpoenaed next. And me. I went to bed early for the first time in weeks, dreaming of calm waters and red koi gliding beneath lily pads. They wanted to drain my pond. Instead, they flooded themselves. The thing about bureaucracies, especially the corrupt ones, is they don't collapse all at once. They unravel, thread by thread, motion by motion, subpoena by subpoena. I just never expected to be at the center of that unraveling, flipping through depositions with a mug of coffee, while lawyers whispered about felony charges like it was a Monday morning staff meeting. Karen Stafford, former Queen of Covenants and Codes, was officially indicted on 3 felony counts and 5 misdemeanors. The news hit the residents of Everidge Pines like a tsunami, especially the ones who donated to the Environmental Preservation Legal Fund, which, it turned out, was just Karen's slush fund for drone rentals and under-the-table contractor fees. Meanwhile, my lawsuit against the HOA moved into gear. Carla Hayes, my attorney, didn't waste a breath. She filed on counts of defamation, business interference, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She even added an itemized loss analysis of koi sales I missed during the height of the HOA's sabotage campaign. If they're going to drag you through hell, she told me, we're going to invoice them for every damn matchstick. Then came the court-ordered discovery. Emails. So many emails. HOA meeting notes, text threads, payment receipts. A paper trail of petty tyranny. One particularly damning string included a message from Karen to the fake inspector, Craig Maddox, dated weeks before any violation was ever issued. It read, "Find something to pin on him. If we can scare him out, that pond will drain itself." They didn't even try to encrypt it. My favorite moment came during a pre-trial deposition when Carla asked Karen, point blank, if she had ever been to my property. She said no. Carla slid a printed frame from one of my motion-activated trail cameras across the table. There was Karen, on my land, hands on hips, staring down my filtration system like it had insulted her mother. Karen didn't say a word. Her lawyer just sighed like a man staring at a collapsed bridge. While the civil case geared up, the criminal proceedings marched forward. Craig Maddox flipped first. The moment prosecutors offered him immunity, he threw Karen under the bus, the tires, and the entire chassis. Claimed she'd paid him to forge inspection notes, coached him on which violations to cite, and instructed him to include scientific-sounding language to confuse any outsiders. "Make it sound EPA-ish," she'd texted him. The prosecution was delighted. They called it conspiracy. I called it karma. By late spring, the trial date for my civil case was set. In the meantime, Carla negotiated a preliminary injunction that officially barred the HOA, or what was left of it, from communicating with me or interfering with any of my operations. Which was good, because I had recently secured a grant from the Washington Environmental Initiative to expand my Kiwi breeding program and build a visitors pavilion near the pond. When word of the expansion got out, a few former HOA members actually reached out, not to harass me, but to ask if they could volunteer. One woman said her son wanted to study biology, and if I ever needed help testing water quality, he'd bring his own lab kit. Funny how quickly fear turns into friendliness when the boot shifts feet. Of course, not all the fallout was gentle. There were protests, small ones. A group of die-hard HOA loyalists held handmade signs at the edge of my property. "Stop pond pollution," "Koi aren't native," and one bizarrely specific banner that read, "Filters kill frogs." I brought them lemonade. It's hard to scream eco-terrorist at a guy handing you cold drinks. Behind the scenes, things got nastier. Karen's legal team tried to argue that the HOA had implied jurisdiction over neighboring lots based on a decades-old clause in a development plan no one had ever enforced. Carla responded by dragging out aerial maps, state code, and a notarized letter from the county zoning office that said, in plain terms, Everidge Pines HOA does not have authority beyond its platted boundaries. Period. Every argument they made collapsed under paperwork. Karen's legal fees ballooned. The HOA insurance provider declared the board's actions a malicious and unauthorized breach of policy and refused to pay out defense costs. The HOA's reserve fund dried up faster than a mud puddle in August. At a final emergency meeting, the remaining members voted to dissolve the board entirely and transfer all remaining assets to a temporary community trust just to avoid further liability, which was adorable and legally useless because Carla had filed liens and the court had frozen every account with an Everidge Pines stamp on it. As we prepared for the civil trial, a local news outlet ran a follow-up piece titled, "How a Fish Pond Toppled a Neighborhood Empire." The article ended with a quote from me. "I just wanted to raise koi. But when someone tries to poison your pond with lies, you fight back. And sometimes the water fights with you." I didn't say it to be poetic, but damn if it didn't feel like justice was finally rippling in my direction. The courtroom was freezing. Not from the air conditioning, but from the tension. Karen sat stiffly in a blazer that probably cost more than my filtration system, her expression frozen somewhere between arrogance and dread. I sat beside Carla, calm on the outside, but counting each second like I was back at auction bidding for my first load of koi. The judge, an older man with a tired voice but sharp eyes, didn't need much time. The evidence had spoken long before closing arguments. He ruled in our favor on every count. Defamation, business interference, harassment, fraud. Brandon Holt, he said, is awarded $150,000 in damages. The court further recognizes his ecological project as beneficial infrastructure in accordance with Washington state standards. Carla squeezed my arm. I didn't say anything. I just let the words settle, like sediment sinking to the bottom of my pond. Karen looked like she might faint. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering something about appeals, but the damage was done. The ruling meant more than just money. It was public validation. Proof that everything I'd built wasn't just legal, it was admired. News trucks rolled up by sunset. Reporters asked how it felt to defeat an HOA. I told them I didn't defeat anyone. They tripped on their own lies, I said. I just moved the flashlight. The best part came a week later. A state senator's aide called me. They wanted to discuss using my property as a demonstration site for sustainable land management, school field trips, environmental programs, grants. I gave a cautious yes, but I wasn't in it for politics. I just wanted my damn pond back. Meanwhile, what remained of the HOA dissolved completely. Bankrupt, powerless. The office, once so smug in its signage and silence, stood empty. I bought the building at a foreclosure auction, $50 and a handshake. I donated it to the county as a community garden site. Let the land do what the people never could, grow something real. As for Karen, word was she sold her house and left Washington. Her name became a joke among locals, a lesson about arrogance, overreach, and messing with a koi farmer who reads environmental law for fun. The pond never looked better. The koi shimmered under the sun. The cascade bubbled quietly, and the sign near the water's edge, freshly mounted, read, "This water washed away more than algae." It cleared the truth. The tourists came quietly at first. A few ecology students, a curious couple from Seattle, one old man who'd built his own graywater system in the 90s and said, "You did it better." They walked the gravel paths I laid myself, asked questions about the filtration reeds, watched the koi swim in perfect circles, and left smiling. By summer, the word had spread. The county's site listed the pond as a model of sustainable aquaculture. Busloads of kids arrived with clipboards and sunscreen. A local school district designed an entire environmental science module around my property. They even gave the lesson plan a name, Resilience Through Restoration. Not bad, huh? I still kept my schedule. Up before dawn, feeding the fish, checking the pH, trimming the cattails. But now I gave talks twice a week, short, practical ones. No flashy PowerPoints, just, this is what works, here's what to avoid. And yes, the frogs showed up on their own. People assumed I was proud of my victory, but I wasn't thinking about winning. I thought about the silence that came after the HOA meetings stopped. The mail stopped bringing fake warnings, and Karen's black SUV disappeared for good. That was the real prize. Quiet, space to breathe. Water that stayed still unless the wind asked it to move. I kept one reminder from it all, a laminated copy of the fake fine, $100 due for ecological violations. I mounted it in my shed above the hose rack. Beside it, a framed photo of the final court order. Sometimes I caught neighbors from Everidge Pines peering through the trees, not with malice anymore, more like quiet awe. One waved once, I nodded back. No one from the old HOA ever spoke to me again. Their community formed a new board eventually, this time without Karen and without illusions of empire. They planted native trees along their edge, and once I noticed, they even redirected a drainage pipe properly. A small thing, but it meant something. Late one evening, I stood by the pond watching dragonflies flit over the surface. The sun dipped low, turning the water gold. I thought about all the dirt they'd tried to throw on me. How, in the end, it just fed the roots. Behind me, the sign at the gate creaked gently in the wind. The same words etched in steel now. This is not just water. This is what truth looks like when it holds its ground.